My name is Craig Rousseau. I am a Life Scout, never quite made it to Eagle. I was with Troop 16 in Swansea, Mass. In the mid to late 80s and spent many a summer at Camp Cachalot. It's all a bit hazy to me, but I remember being with the troop, uh, you know, as soon as I could. I was at Cachalot. My father was a scoutmaster with Troop 16, and so he had been there with my brother years before that, and he really enjoyed the camp. And uh, so I was really looking forward to Camp Cachalot. So I spent several years there as a camper in like the mid to early 80s, and then I want to say it was 87 and 88. I could be wrong. I was on staff for 2 years. And when I was on staff, I was in charge of the handicrafts and doing the arts and crafts merit badges. And I was just talking with a friend earlier today about when I was the handicrafts director. One year I was up at the 21 Club, and then one year I was down at the boathouse, which was a nice little change of pace. And the person I was talking to was actually in charge of Kelly Pellissier, had done handicrafts, but she was down at the boathouse. Yeah, what I do for a living these days is actually my dream job when I was a kid. I draw comics professionally. I work for Marvel Comics. I worked for DC Comics, Image Comics, uh, Scout Comics, Dark Horse Comics, Disney. Pretty much every one of the major comic publishers I've been working for on and off for the last 20 odd years now. And right now I'm working on a Hellboy book for Dark Horse, which is pretty exciting. Okay, yeah. Besides, the Hellboy stuff, I've done my own creator-owned book, which is called the Perhapanauts, which is always a shameless plug that you got to do, which is about a Bigfoot, a Chupacabra, and a Mothman, and it takes place in our universe, but it also branches out into other cryptozoological issues. And one of the places we actually have focused on at one point is the Bridgewater Triangle, which I learned about in Scouts. So it all comes around again. But I've worked on Batman, The Flash, Impulse, Harley Quinn, Iron Man, the Avengers, Spider-Man, all the big names, and some stuff at Disney. I've worked on some Kim Possible stuff, and I'm sure there's more, but pretty much all the big titles, big characters I've done in one way or another at Marvel and DC, which is pretty awesome to think of. If I was a kid at Camp Cachalot reading these comics, to think that that's where I would be 30 years later kind of blows my mind. Yeah, besides my favorite, my creator-owned stuff, which is my own personal, preference, I've really enjoyed a book called Impulse, which is the first thing I did, which is about the Flash's great grandson, I think, from the future, and he kind of does everything so fast because he is so fast that he does things not necessarily with thinking. So it's all on impulse. So it was a lot of exaggerated characters and a lot of fun. It was an innocence in the book that I really could relate to. Just it wasn't a grim and gritty comic book. It was a light and fun one. But then I really enjoyed working on Batman because, let's face it, it's Batman. Do I think that scouting in any way fostered where I am today? Absolutely. And, simply just working on arts and crafts merit badges and being in the handicrafts certainly was something that was a natural progression for me, and liking to draw and wanting to draw. And I still remember to this day visiting my brother when he was on staff, and his friend Dave Calvin had a whole pile of comic books in his footlocker. And I remember sitting and reading these X-Men comics, and it was the first time I'd ever seen the X-Men, and it blew my mind. And I told my mom when we went home I had to go find these comic books, and I think that was one of those memories that sticks with me. And I remember my brother telling about these books that he had read that I had no idea were even out there, and I thought that was pretty wild. So, yeah. When I applied to be a camp counselor on staff, I went with my best friend at the time, Andy Myers, who also was in Troop 16 in Swansea. We were the only two from the troop on staff, but he was there and he was working in the environmental sciences, and he was in charge of that area. And I remember that was when Dennis Wilkinson was on staff, and Brian Bastrash and Tom Bednarz and Pete Ashworth and Manny Bagasso and Chauncey Burr, all these names that constantly kind of rumble around the back of my head, and some, not so in the back because I see them every now and then. When I think back to Cachalot and being there all summer, it was a sense of camaraderie. It was becoming friends with these kids that, didn't live in my hometown. They didn't go to my high school, but we had common interests, and we got to know each other from being on staff and doing events together, and going out, on staff night out, and finding common ground and learning new things about people, which I thought was just a great experience when you're in that small town your whole life, and you finally expand your horizons a little bit, which I thought was really important. And I really enjoyed, like I said, the camaraderie and making friendships that would last for years. Oh, when I think about Cachalot, and I first off, I remember, that long road, bumpy road in where they had all the signs that you would drive past. And I remember as soon as I saw them, I knew that I was home for the summer. It was a nice feeling. And then, I remember being off on my own up at the 21 Club for that first year, doing the handicrafts. And it was nice to see the kids walking up the hill or taking a shortcut to come up to the 21 Club. But I, remember hanging out in the waterfront all that time. And I remember going both as a counselor and as a camper, and being up at the different campsites up on the hill, and the mess hall. And I mean, I loved the mess hall when you'd walk in and you would see all those plaques that went back decades, and it got you thinking, like, wow, there were kids that were like my dad's age that made these plaques that are hanging on the wall now. And the history of it, I thought, even back then as a kid, I thought was pretty wild. Did we do things that were probably not all on the up and up? Sure, with mostly harmless, I would think. I do remember, the deciding at one point it would be a fun idea to block off one of the streams and make like a little sitting hot tub area, and then being told rather quickly, like, you're really screwing up the flow of water here, and you've got to knock this whole thing down. So we did, and it was something we probably would have told the campers not to do, but we had done it anyway. And I just remember going out on nights out into town, and going and just enjoying being out and having fun with friends and making memories that way. I mean, it wasn't anything crazy. It's nothing I would say we're going to get in trouble for, but we had a good time doing it, and we look back on that fondly. Let's see. The last time I was physically at camp was probably, it was a few years ago. I had gone down with my dad because he was there to see one of the ceremonies that was put on by the Alumni Association. And I'm trying to think who it was that he went to see, but we spent plenty of time. Well, I spent time walking around. At that point, my dad was kind of having a tough time walking, so we didn't do as much visiting of the old stomping grounds. But it was probably 3 or 4 years ago at least, and a lot had changed, but a lot had not changed, which was a reassuring feeling, I think. Yes, my dad, was a graphic designer and illustrator, technical illustrator, and he worked for the Newport Navy base for years. And I think he was one of the reasons that I was so interested in drawing, and he was very supportive of drawing. And, I do remember him designing some pretty beautiful patches that we still have. I don't have all of my scouting stuff, but I still have plenty of it put away. And I mean, I remember just looking at all the patches that he would trade with people. And this was before the internet. This was before you know, you'd be able to go online and find something quickly. So he was mailing things away with other people, or, you know, he National Jamboree, being able to trade patches with that. So I think he was inspired by designing the patches and seeing what else was out there. And I certainly was. Troop 16, Bob LeComte. Bob was a legend, and he really was inspiring in so many ways, and not just about scouting. As an artist, as a budding artist back then, you know, I would spend a lot of time with my dad down at his art store, Riverside Art, and he would talk about art, but he would talk about scouting, and it was pretty amazing to get to know him as a person, as an artist, as a scout leader. And I'm just glad that I had the chance to do all this. And there are people that have come and gone that have left an impression, and Bob was certainly one of those people. Being that it's like 75th anniversary, and I have to think back to how long ago it was that I was there, which is 30 odd years. It does make me pretty, I think of how to put it, like how I can acknowledge the history of Cachalot, which, you know, the legacy of you know, generations of kids who have been there. Just talking with a friend whose son is in a troop right now, and they were one of the last troops to be out at Cachalot just fairly recently for the Klondike Derby, I believe. And, you know, I mentioned, oh, I'm talking to so-and-so, and he's like, that name sounds familiar. And it turns out that it was Brian Bastrash, who is his next door neighbor over next few towns over. So it all kind of comes together in these weird little ways that to this day, you know, there are connections that were made that we didn't even know about, which I just find fascinating. And, you know, we're good friends with Charlie Pellissier and Kelly Pellissier, who had spent plenty of time at Cachalot as well. And I can go to a concert in Boston and turn around and bump into Dennis and Tom, which it cracks me up every time, which I think is just great. Again, it was really a fun time to be involved in scouting for me. And I never went past Life Scout because life got in the way, and I went in a different direction of scouts. And, you know, I asked my son at one point, do you really want to be in scouts? Because we could certainly do it. And he had different ideas of what he wanted to do. So we haven't done that. So every now and then I'll see friends talking about scouting, and I get a little wistful thinking, well, that would have been kind of fun. Because I remember all the fun stuff that we had done with scouts. And I still remember driving to camp every weekend with Andy Myers, and we took turns driving our Volkswagen Beetles down there, and it was a small thing, but there was a little diner right there that we'd stop in every Sunday and order the same thing, and we'd leave thinking, by the end of the summer, I hope they remember us and they say, do you want the usual? And the last time we pulled in, they did, and it really just made the whole summer like one of those moments that we still talk about to this day. And it was, you know, a goofy idea that as a teenager was very funny. Like, we're regulars here now because we come every week, and because we're going to Camp Cachalot. It was a lot of fun.